My name is Dr. Robert Anderson Plimer, esotericist, occultist, magician, alchemist, hermeticist, and member of the order Typhonus. I'm a classicist. Studied classics, so my linguistic skills are in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, hieroglyphics, and some bits and pieces of other languages as well, but mainly in classical languages. Most of my books, I've written 12 books, lots of articles on Egyptian, magic, alchemy, hermeticism, Thoth tarot deck, Crowley, other esoteric subjects for articles, including a vast array of lectures and online courses. Originally it began as Courtyard Publishing, and we moved it into Courtyard Alchemy, and then eventually that moved into Black Lodge Publishing, Black Lodge Education. But Courtyard Alchemy was originally an alchemical institution we'd set up here on the Isle of Wight in Bembridge, where I ran courses in spagyrics, plant alchemy basically, and mineral alchemy, so making spagyric tinctures and teaching spagyrics. These were things that I'd studied and been taught over 35, 40 years ago, principally by my father, who was an alchemist, a blacksmith, an alchemist, but I learned a lot from him and by his friends and from his friends in Edinburgh at the time. So basically we were moving all of that knowledge down here, and a lot of the books in my library are alchemical books along with other magical books. But Courtyard Alchemy became Black Lodge Publishing and Black Lodge Education. That was the development. Black Lodge is basically a magical, it's a system which is based on Egyptian techniques and books which I've been decoding and studying and translating. It gives sort of broad-based education in Black Lodge, and what we do here is sort of the magical part of it is based on scrying techniques, Thoth tarot deck, but mainly Egyptian techniques which were developed over, well, at least 4,000 years ago, and have been recorded in early hieroglyphics, middle hieroglyphics, and demotic. And so there's a lot of magical aspects that we've now brought forward, and I think you'll find if you read any of these books, you'll be surprised by how much these ancient Egyptian techniques are and have been used by various esoteric orders over the past 2,000 years. Because we had so many people coming here to the Phoenix Club, which I run from the house every month, one lecture a month, a few of them were interested in organising a slightly bigger conference. So we thought, well, let's do this, because I normally do, if I'm doing conferences, they're normally on the mainland in England. So it was a great idea to put together a conference situated here on the Isle of Wight. So we chose Ryde, which is one of the main towns on the island. We went along, had a look at the venue, had a look at the room, and it seemed ideal for an occult conference. And so my first job was to make sure I could involve some friends and colleagues in the magical fraternity here in England, which I did. So I tried to make the conference as broad as possible. Night of Pan developed from my interest in the Thoth tarot deck, which I've used and I was taught. I've used it for the past 30, 40 years almost. So it's my go-to tarot deck. Interestingly, working, and I was teaching at the time, I was teaching the Major Arcana, or the Major Atu. I was teaching that with the 22 paths, and suddenly realising when I'd looked back at some of Crowley's work, especially the Book of Lies, I saw how close the first 22 of the 93 poems were to the 22 Major Atu, the major trumps. And when I started to look into it in detail, and no one had written about it before, suddenly they matched up. The first 22 poems of Crowley's Book of Lies matches up with the 22 major tarot, the major arcana. So the Night of Pan is basically a book where I use Crowley's poetry, some of the commentary, and I write large commentaries on his poetry and the text and the tarot. So it's a book that's a mixing together of some Crowley ideas as well as some modern commentaries. It also unveils, if you're keen to read it, it also unveils the grade system within the AA. If you look very closely at the tarot deck, because it's basically a journey down the tree from 0 to 22, but it's also a journey for practitioners and neophytes up the tree of life. So it's a system that can work both ways. One of the major points in Knight of Pan is the crossing of the abyss. When you cross the abyss and relinquish the ego. So about ego mortification by crossing the abyss and reaching the 3 higher grades on the tree of life in the AA system, Crowley's early AA system. So it was an interesting find, an interesting discovery. And as I said, I take it to bits in the book in quite a bit of detail.
So my name is Sian Sibley. I'm a witch from South Wales. My coven is called Dragon Oak, and we are a traditional coven that operates on a very earth-based traditional path. We use a lot of plants and working with plant spirits and genus loci, and we do a lot of work for conservation and a lot of ecological work around the area. If I could make a change in the pagan world, is for pagans to be more knowledgeable and understanding about why we need to be more ecological and get involved more with ecological things. My first book was a book called Unveiling the Green, and it was a book about working alchemically, psychologically and astrologically with plants. It's about how we've distanced ourselves from nature and about the way that we can reintegrate ourselves into the natural cycles of things and involve ourselves with the green spirits more. And this allows us an access to working with the earth as an organism, and that then helps us to reintegrate our practice and our general lives, because our lives are very disconnected from the natural world at the moment. We tend to house ourselves within our little boxes and we don't venture out into the wild, and that's where you find that reconnection with nature increases well-being, it increases your understanding of where your roots should be. And because of the disconnect we have, that's causing a lot of mental health problems. It's causing a lot of disconnection with the things that we're doing to the world. So for example, using the world in our industrial endeavours and not thinking about how we're affecting the other people that are non-humans in the world. What's happening at the moment is that we've moved from a model of medicine which was holistic, which involved finding out what the actual problem was that was causing the disease and then treating the symptoms whilst treating the cause, to a symptom-based medical model where we treat the symptoms but we don't actually find out what's wrong and what's going wrong with the person to help them. The problem you have with that is that if you don't treat the cause, you're never going to cure the issue, because the symptoms will just continue. And and this is controversial and I apologise, it's within a pharmaceutical company's interests to treat symptoms, because that way you have a never-ending market of drugs that you can treat the symptoms with without actually looking at what the causes are. Honestly, I think the understanding that paganism is not about reading a book, it's not about casting a circle, it's not about doing the things that people think that pagans and witches should do. It's about getting involved, it's about becoming active in your community, it's about making a difference in the real world, it's about changing people's attitudes towards the livingness of the planet, to move away from the mechanization that we have at the moment, where we're thinking that things are mechanical, bodies are mechanical, medicine is mechanical, to being an organically based ideology, so that every time you take an action, if you eat a piece of food, that you understand that that food was once a living organism, that you are transferring that energy into your body, and that you should be thankful for the life of the other thing that you're consuming, because it's given up its life to give you that energy, to do in the world, to go and be active, to do things rather than sit aside and think that you're practicing paganism because you are celebrating the wheel of the year. Get out and clean beaches, get out and clean rivers, get out and make a difference to our young people. And that way then you're making a real difference to the world.
So my name's Sean Woodward. I'm an occultist, an artist, a writer and a musician. I've been studying the occult and practicing it since around the age of 12 or 13 when I first read the works of Aleister Crowley and also the British occultist Kenneth Grant. And it was through Kenneth Grant's works, particularly Cults of the Shadow, that as a 13-year-old I discovered the work of Michael Bertio, a voodoo Gnostic occultist and magician living in Chicago. And the influence of his work with voodoo and the voodoo spirits led me 10, 11 years ago to making contact with Michael Bertio and in time becoming the British Grand Master of his occult order, Ordo Templi Orientis La Couvent Noire. The interesting thing about the work of the order is that when Michael Bertio published his seminal work, the Voodoo Gnostic Workbook, within it he included a lot of the papers of the order and made public really a sort of textbook on how to work with it without necessarily being a member. So the first part of his book is called the Lucky Hoodoo Grimoire, and it explains how a student can contact the hoodoo spirits themselves and through that open up the doors to the world of the spirits and the world of the voodoo Gnostic. And I should say that it differs from traditional voodoo that most people will be familiar with, you know, from the voodoo of Haiti or the Louisiana voodoo of New Orleans, in that it encompasses many other esoteric branches such as Western Hermeticism, Masonic teachings, and what people would think of as magical practices. The works of Aleister Crowley and his own contact with prey-to-human intelligences such as Lam or Aiwas or the wizard Abolthaya. So the voodoo Gnostic path, I tend to think, probably includes something for everyone. So Keys to the Hoodoo Kingdom was a book I wrote in response to my own experiences working with the voodoo spirits and the work of Michael Bertio. But Keys to the Hoodoo Kingdom contains many of the practical aspects that people would find useful in gaining entry, not just to my work, but to that of Michael Bertio and that of the voodoo Gnostic current itself. So many people will first be introduced by my work, I think, from the art and the graphics. And I found some 10, 13 years ago when I first became re-engaged in this path that my own artistic abilities were woken up from slumber. I'd always drawn, always painted from being a child, but working with the voodoo spirits took this to a whole new level. At one point, there was a period where I was producing 7 or 8 images a night consistently for about a year or so and building up this vast body of work, of artistic work, based upon sort of images of the spirits themselves, based upon what they were showing me in the spirit world.